Alright, so now we'll continue our kind of lifespan approach to sexuality. If you take other psychology courses like lifespan development, the whole course kind of takes you through, about like conception and prenatal environment all the way to, birth, of course, childhood, adolescence, young adulthood, and old age. Kind of just describing what the experience is like, the developmental experience and whatnot. And part of that is sexuality. And so, like I said, we're mostly focusing on adolescents and adults, so that's what we're going to talk about today. So, I reserved a lot of our discussion on marriage proper for this week because, that is something that really differentiates children and adolescents to, an actual adult, is being able to and being married, and then divorce and topics like cheating and things like that are kind of reserved for this week. So that's what we will, those are some of the topics that we'll talk about that kind of go along with chapter 13. So we can start things off by a really interesting topic, internet dating. I know a lot of people, know of a lot of people who have used internet dating, mostly younger people, like around in their 20s or whatnot. And, a lot of people, I'd say the vast majority of people say that it was kind of unsuccessful for them, but then, quite a few people still saying at the same time that it was successful for them. So just in internet dating sites alone, of course there's like eHarmony, Match, OkCupid, Plenty of Fish, all these sort of things. Some that are more so like, I'm trying to find someone to marry versus like, I'm trying to find someone to hook up with tonight. But both can be considered an internet dating site, as see the definition, just singles to connect. But even that is not, it's not just singles. It could be someone who's in a relationship and they're looking for a third partner for, to actually be in a relationship with them, or to be sexual with, like a couple looking for a third person and whatnot. But according to your book, more than 1,000 sites in the United States. I know some are like based on religion, and like I've seen like countrysingles.com or something like that. So all sorts of different websites for adults to connect with each other. And so just looking at the prevalence of how often people are actually engaging in these sites. And so about each month, let's say more than 40% of adults, 40% of singles visit dating sites. I wonder if this is a little exaggerated, but it may not be. That's pretty high, 40% of singles visiting dating sites. That's pretty high, but that's what your book says, at least. And so 30% of singles meet their dates online now, according to Research Now in 2015. That's like really high. So just think about 40 years ago, and I think a lot of people meet who they end up dating by like a mutual friend, or like at a social organization or things like that. But this is a very substantial number of people, 30% of singles meeting who they're dating online. So I'll give you a little teaser. Our discussion question for today is: do you think that the internet has changed substantially our way that we date and therefore our romantic relationships and whatnot? So, it's a good question to ask ourselves. But even in 2015, a substantial number of people dating someone through a friend, but even that's a few less people finding who they date through a friend compared to dating online. And you could say that it did greatly alter the single scene. On one side of the coin, you can say, no, this didn't really change anything. It's just the format in which we're getting to know each other and whatnot. But then you could say, on the other side of things, no, this has greatly altered the way that people match. That's kind of a good question as well. Are these dating sites actually better at matching us up with someone who's compatible with us than, say, meeting through a friend? Meeting through a friend, you don't necessarily have all that much in common. I mean, you probably would incidentally, but like on these dating sites, you can be very specific about what you're looking for and all that sort of stuff. So that's definitely a question to look at, be kind of thinking about and whatnot. Are people, like, are dating sites actually better at matching with a compatible partner than how we have traditionally started dating? So, as you can imagine, a lot of psychologists have studied internet dating, and they are like actually in these dating sites looking at, like at what we have here. Heterosexual men are more proactive than women on dating sites. So a lot of psychologists looking at gender and then looking at number of messages that a person has sent. And they've found that men send 4 times as many messages as women, heterosexual men. And so it's kind of the same thing, I wonder, like in the non-online dating, that I think that heterosexual men, send more communications, let's say like at a bar or something like that, that guys are much more likely to go up to a woman and say how he's attracted to her or something like that is more likely than the opposite, even if, there's a substantial amount of women being proactive and whatnot. The research shows that men tend to be more proactive overall than women. That doesn't mean that women aren't proactive at all, though. And so the largest demographic of users of internet dating actually is higher income and college educated type people. I'm not really sure why that is in particular, but that's just what the research has found. So just like I said, these researchers looking at gender and looking at who has sent most of the first messages and stuff like that, they also saw that people who use online dating sites tend to be in that higher income bracket. So let's say over $50,000 a year in income, and then mostly college educated type people. So it may be like a result of things like being a little more conservative sexually, that one feels a little less comfortable putting themselves out there on the internet and whatnot. So I wonder if it's kind of like a liberal politically, or I guess, I don't know, socially conservative versus socially liberal type of thing. That more socially liberal type people are feel more comfortable doing online dating than are more socially conservative people. Socially conservative being, more like, yeah, y'all know what that is. But it's not just younger people who are doing this, that the 50 and older population is really starting to boom as far as number of people who are accessing these dating sites and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see if that segment continues to use the internet for online dating and whatnot. I'd also be interested to know if in this 50 and older population, how much of those are looking just to hook up and how much of those are looking for like an actual substantial relationship and things like that. So that's an interesting research question. And so I already asked this philosophical question: are dating sites better at matching for compatibility than a meeting in person? But psychologically, or psychological research, I would think that you would see higher relationship satisfaction in these relationships that people met online than people who met in traditional type places. So if they are better at matching, then most likely they are very satisfied with their relationships and whatnot. How we talked about similarity and whatnot in relationships, but that's not the only thing that compatibility has to do with. So there's something good to look at as well. So in my previous class, I asked people, posed the statement: I've used an online dating site before, and most of my students were around 20 years old, and about 50% saying yes I have, and 50% saying no, that they haven't. So that's about kind of what we were seeing before. What do we see? So each month, more than 40% of singles visit dating sites, and then we're seeing about 50% using a dating site. Yeah. So cohabitation, obviously this has increased since like the 50s and 60s. People living together and having a sexual relationship but not being married. So I think this is especially popular for younger adults, maybe in their early 20s, who haven't settled down on a career or settled down on children and things like that, and are not quite ready to get married, but intend on getting married later in life, like 30s or so. But even in the older population, I think cohabitation is quite prevalent as well. So it's not just limited to people in their early 20s. So 24% of never married adults, 25 to 34, currently live with a partner. So I was kind of talking about, like 21, 22, 23, but the research is showing even a little bit older, so 25 to 34, about 25% of them live with a partner and have never been married. So that kind of goes along with what I was saying, though. So in 1996, about 3 million people in these relationships, like in a home, but are not married. And then jumping up to 2012, so many more people, 8 million, which is, almost a triple increase in that time difference. About 2/3 of couples who marry have been living together. So I think maybe in the 50s and 60s, you definitely see a lot more people Um, they date and they get married, and then once they marry, they move in with each other. But I think much more so now you have people who live together first, maybe for about a year or so, and then get engaged, or get engaged then move in with each other, or move in with each other then get engaged then get married, sort of thing. So 2/3 of couples who marry have lived together already. So that's very sizable amount of people who are cohabitating before getting married. Low income and education correlated. So the lower the income, the more likely the couple is going to cohabitate together rather than getting married. Not sure why this would be. And then education correlated. So I wonder if it's less education, the more likely they are to cohabitate. I'm not sure. So college educated women tend to wait longer before moving in together. So that's interesting. So I do think that it's lower education is correlated with cohabitation. I'm not exactly sure why that would be, though. And another name for it, especially if people have been living together in the same household without being married for a long time, could be considered a domestic partnership. Right. So let's talk about marriage. Stephanie Kuntz, you can look her up. She's pretty cool. I think she's an anthropologist, and she wrote a pretty authoritative book on like the anthropology of marriage, and that's a pretty good read if you want to read that book by her. And she talks a lot about how marriage really has only recently been about the relationship and the love and connection and sex and all these sort of things. And she argues pretty well that, maybe 100 years ago, 3,000 years ago, 2,000, 1,500 years, 100, like that whole time, that marriage was much more of a economical and political type thing, rather than to actually be based on love and whatnot. So not just Stephanie Kuntz, but also Hayesha in 2014 arguing that really marriage for love and satisfaction only emerged a couple hundred years ago. I think that's easy to fall in the trap of kind of thinking, people have always married for love and whatnot, even if it was 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago. And I'd really be interested to know, what is the relationship satisfaction, or was that even 1,000 years ago, was relationship satisfaction and within marriage even like a pertinent topic or not? So some things about marriage are still practical now. It's not just about love and whatnot. So things like defining rights to inheritance. If you're married to so and so, then you unless the will says something else, then you inherit everything from your spouse and whatnot. So see, that's a pretty economic, practical type thing. And combining skills and resources and whatnot. It's also not so much about love and sex in particular, but often about just being able to, it's more stable having two people with a job in a household rather than, just one person in a household with a job and whatnot. So it's kind of practical. Marriage is practical in a lot of ways. 2008, more than 40% of babies in the U.S. were born to unmarried women, mostly cohabitating parents. So just like we saw before, where cohabitation is increasing a lot, I think that a lot of people are feeling more comfortable with actually having children before they get married. So in 2008, I'd like to see what it's like now, but in 2008 at least, more than 40% of babies in the U.S. were born to unmarried women. I think that statistic is also increased a whole lot compared to same as cohabitation in general without having children and whatnot. So let's talk about marriage in collectivistic versus individualistic cultures. So most individualistic cultures would be considered like the US and Canada and Western Europe and whatnot. So much more about individual pursuits and individual happiness and whatnot by and large. Whereas collectivistic cultures like a lot of Asia and Africa and probably South America as well. So let's look at the difference between marriage in the collectivistic versus individualistic cultures. And so collectivistic cultures, like I was just saying, emphasize group goals over individual goals. So whereas individualistic cultures, a person, is much more interested in their own personal income and things like that. Collectivistic cultures more so coming together as a full family, thinking about their resources and whatnot. In collectivistic cultures, while on some level, even in individualistic cultures like the U.S., marriage is about uniting the families in a very significant way. But I think that maybe in these collectivistic cultures, like we're saying, in many Asian countries, it's a lot about uniting the families, not on just like an emotional level, but also like a practical level. So I think the families in these collectivistic cultures of two people who get married are much more likely to actually rely on each other in ways. Remember that arranged marriages are still common to this day. Obviously not very common in the U.S., but still common in different cultures, like in India and whatnot. I'd be interested to know like what percent of marriages from, let's say, India are arranged versus not. That would be an interesting statistic to me. And look at that. That's exactly the statistic we have. So 90% of marriages in India are arranged by parents. So that's a huge amount, but now I would be interested to know, has that actually decreased? So like maybe 50, 100 years ago, was it 100% of marriages in India being arranged by parents? I'd like to know that. I'm not sure why I had this. There are 129 women killed for marrying without permission in Pakistan in 2010. So I guess that is like women who don't opt in for an arranged marriage in Pakistan actually being killed, which is pretty like very surprising to me. And then as far as individualistic cultures, I think that in collectivistic cultures too, that of course that it's important, the question of, are you happy in your relationship? And of course, even in these collectivistic cultures, that divorce is there. But I think maybe by and large, the individualistic cultures do emphasize a marriage is for you sort of thing. And, does it benefit you and all this sort of stuff, the individual, as opposed to does this marriage benefit these two families and whatnot. And just to dip into childhood type stuff here for a minute, I'd like to know which countries exactly this is, but girls from 8 to 17 years old, at least 60 million girls within the world are married at this point. So it becomes a good question of are these girls ready for marriage? Is this just another expression of patriarchal society where men are like, I want a wife and I'm just going to go get one sort of thing. And so these girls are kind of forced into it. Or is that just my, ethnocentristic bias and whatnot, that I think that would be unhealthy? So that's a good question to ask oneself. But to many, obviously thinks that this is unhealthy for our larger society and world, saying that many of these girls face forced sex, denial of education, and have special health risks. So it definitely looks very doubtful that much of this is all that healthy. Pretty young women, so still in adolescence and whatnot, able to get pregnant and have children, but still not fully developed enough. So a lot of traumatic childbirth and whatnot. And, when you consider that poverty is a major factor contributing to child marriage, it's just adding on to the argument that this is probably an unhealthy thing for our society and the world. So marriage in the United States, if you take all of the households in the entire U.S., only about half of those contain a married couple. It was in the 50s and 60s, it was 80% or 90%, something like that. And so it's reduced way down to about half of American households having a married couple within it. And then, so here are some of the reasons that people give for not getting married. So let's look at 34 and older first, the dark blue. 34 and older, not ready to settle down, too young, so kind of saying I'll do it later, but not now. So that is about 11% of them. Not financially prepared, about 20%, and haven't found what they're looking for. It was the majority reason for not getting married in this age groups, just still haven't found really what they're looking for. But all these people in all these age groups, so from 18 to beyond 35, all still saying just not ready to settle down, still feel too young and whatnot, especially the younger ages, and then most everyone not really feeling financially prepared to get married, and a lot of people just not finding what they're looking for in a partner. So they may be dating and whatnot, but still haven't felt confident about getting married. So it sounds like a lot of people still do kind of end up getting married, and do see that as like a developmental sort of thing. Like eventually they will get married, but haven't yet. All right, so we talked mostly about relationship satisfaction before. So let's talk about sexual satisfaction, and this is and let's think about it in the context of marriage. So, a relationship that is long-standing and whatnot. I wonder, this is kind of a side note, but I wonder what the sexual satisfaction, I wonder if like the sexual satisfaction for hooking up has any resemblance to the sexual satisfaction in marriage. I'd like to know about that. So factors that raise sexual satisfaction, as you imagine, relationship satisfaction itself would raise sexual satisfaction. So most people who feel satisfied sexually also feel close to their partner. So it's kind of like a prerequisite, like feeling emotionally close to our partners, like they validate, listen to us, and all this sort of stuff. And we feel close to them and whatnot, and then sex kind of just, kind of comes out of that relationship. So those things usually being highly correlated, relationship satisfaction and sexual satisfaction, and all the other stuff. So love and commitment and stability. And so it's interesting to think about commitment actually possibly raising sexual satisfaction. And I wonder if there's a gender difference on that, if it's mostly women who, feeling a high amount of commitment, feels satisfied with their sex, with their partner, or versus men. I wonder if a lot of men, some men may not place all that much of an emphasis on the commitment aspect of things as far as being sexually satisfied. So check out this YouTube video by Lori Betito, and The Secret to a Better Sex Life. Let me check real quick just so I can tell you guys. Yeah, so she's a clinical psychologist who specialized in sex therapy. And this TED Talk, she talks about how the secrets to a better sex life and that. So watch that, if you will. And the description should be in that link should be in the description down below, so you can just copy and paste it in. So let's look at factors that lower sexual satisfaction. Men and women in marriages are not equally satisfied with their sexual lives. So that's what I was talking about before, just wondering about this commitment element. Is it mostly women who feel very committed to their relationship and feel like their partner is very committed too, and that raises sexual satisfaction? So let's look at all this and maybe we can answer that question. Women report lower sexual satisfaction than men. I wonder if a lot of that has to do with having an orgasm. I think it's a lot easier for men to achieve orgasms during sex than women. So I wonder if that's like one of the most important things that differentiates the two, women versus men, in their sexual satisfaction. Yeah, wives experience orgasms less than their husbands, so obviously it goes to show us that how important it is for women's partners to make sure that they're satisfied fully sexually. So regularly achieving orgasms, and that it may be the case that intercourse doesn't do it for the woman, so all the other means of sexual expression that we've talked about before can be used to achieve that orgasm. And I don't want us to think that orgasm is the only thing for sexual satisfaction, but it seems to be very important for women to be able to achieve that for sexual satisfaction. So women have greater expectations for the quality of their sexual relationship. I think that's pretty interesting. That would be an interesting study to look at. And let's just bring up a sexual satisfaction scale. Let's look. Okay. So this is just alright, so this is, let's see what year this was in. 2014. There are so many sexual satisfaction surveys out there, but let's just look at this one. So let's see if, so we already know in this one that we could criticize it for not having the orgasm part in here, but questions like, I'm disconcerted with a part of my sexual life, so like actually feeling concern about your sexual life, obviously that's important as far as determining your level of satisfaction. Sex is a source of pleasure for me. This is not necessarily the case for everyone, so that's really going to dictate whether you're satisfied sexually. Feeling sexually attractive. Thinking about sex generates negative emotions. A lot of people who have been abused in some way or assaulted and all that sort of stuff, it's going to be really difficult for a lot of people to just have positive emotions about sexuality and whatnot. Yeah, I think there's some better scales out there. Let's just look real quick at maybe another one. See what this looks like. Okay, Journal of Sexual Medicine, 2005. Let's see if we can, let's see. Okay. See, this is a lot more detailed here as far as the sexual satisfaction scale. So contentment, communication, that is really important. Compatibility. So this is a lot better scale. It's much more detailed. trying to look and see if there's anything like about orgasm or not. Let's see. Yeah, it just kind of depends on the scale and whatnot, whether they have things like that. But I would argue that, being satisfied, getting more into like the physical aspects of sex is really important for like a sexual satisfaction scale. And some married couples, about 50%, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is really a reliable place to get statistics, that married couple both have a job, but they never really have intercourse. A lot of them still say that their relationship is satisfying. So I think it's easy to think, everyone who is in a relationship but not having sex, that their relationship is not very good. But the research tends to show that that's not the case, that there are a lot of people who are fine with being married but not having sex regularly. And this isn't just a thing of, well, yeah, older people, they don't have sex anyway. We know that that's not true, that older people do have sex. So it's not just a thing about getting older. It's a subset of people who don't have much of an inclination to have sex. But about 50% of married couples in 2014. It's interesting. All right, non-monogamy and consensual non-monogamy. All right, so let's look at non-monogamy and consensual non-monogamy. Let's see which one. So we'll look at consensual first, and then I think get to non-consensual non-monogamy. Obviously, non-consensual non-monogamy, cheating, and non-monogamy is a broader construct and doesn't necessitate consensuality or non-consensuality. Could be consensual non-monogamy or non-consensual non-monogamy. So just that basic definition of what is non-monogamy is basically any sexual interaction outside of a couple relationship. So that can be as simple as like a one-night stand with someone. Let's just keep it to consensual non-monogamy first. So could be a one-night stand with something. Let's say Bill and Sally are in a relationship, and Bill and Sally say, yep, we're polyamorous or not completely monogamous or whatever, and Sally has a one-night stand with Sarah or whatever, and it's all good for them or whatever. So any sexual activity. And it also could be Sarah also could fall in love with Sally, and they incorporate a full relationship there. So it could be just a one-night stand, or it can be something more than that, like an actual relationship. And by and large, obviously, polyamory has been much more of a common theme to see throughout history of our world. One man with a relationship with multiple women, as opposed to women with multiple relationships with men. So Penny in 2013, and this is another statistic that I would be really interested in as well, to see if this has increased over the last 7-8 years, and I would think that it probably has. So about 5% of adults in the U.S. saying, yeah, so my partner and I have agreed, could be even spouses too, have agreed that we can be sexual with other people, and from time to time we indulge in that. And so about 5% of adults saying that they do that, and that's a pretty sizable chunk. That's definitely enough people that you could really study this sort of thing, and I think that psychologists definitely do. So it's pretty interesting. I think it's most interesting just because it's like an aberration of the normal sort of heteronormative narrative. Part of the heteronormative narrative, the man, woman, for reproduction, having a child, part of the narrative is that there's no cheating or whatnot, and that the heteronormative narrative is monogamous, at least for men thinking that about their women partners, and then, who knows about the male partners in the heteronormative narrative, whether they actually put themselves to the same standards as their wives. So this could be swinging, an actual open marriage, polyamory, so swinging, like going to parties and sex parties and stuff, even though you could be, married and go to sex parties together or separately. And open marriage in general, so you're married to each other, but you have an additional full-on relationship, and there could be an element of commitment there with that third or fourth person as well. And so, polyamory would be multiple partners, but you're not necessarily married. Rubel and Bogert in 2014 did a study. I'm sure there was a lot of people who are saying, this is such a new trend, things like open marriage and whatnot. I wonder if this is just like an underlying dissatisfaction with their relationship. Why would anyone add on another partner to their relationship or whatnot? They must be dissatisfied with their original one, and really they're just going to end up cheating on their partner and then leaving their partner for this new person, something like that. So Rubel and Bogert actually put that to the test and found that people who are in monogamous relationships and people who are in polyamorous relationships, they, at the very least, they have the same psychological well-being, but also the same relationship quality. So that's a very interesting bit of information there. So the research that we have seems to indicate that even these non-monogamous relationships, that the relationship quality of the original relationship is still, as high as people in monogamous relationships. So it kind of answers the question of like, which is better for me, a non-monogamous relationship or a monogamous relationship? And it seems like it mostly comes down to just, preference, that there's not anything wrong with being in a non-monogamous relationship, though. And part of the kind of like philosophy behind polyamory is that love is infinite. I think that for a lot of people, there's like an underlying assumption that love is finite. So I only have enough love for one romantic partner, but polyamory is saying, no, I have, so much love for my partner. I'm in love with them. I want to love them throughout their whole life. Yet at the same time, I love this other person as well. And so a lot of people give the argument, a lot of polyamorous people give the argument like, you have one child, and that doesn't mean that when you have a second child you'd love them less or something like that, that you can love multiple children. So why can you not love multiple romantic partners? So here's a really good talk on polyamory that I want you guys to watch. So the link will be in the description down below, and that's you can stop at minute 8. Of course you can watch the whole thing, but watch from like the beginning to minute 8 and just kind of pay attention to what her arguments are and whatnot, and see where you fall on the issue. And just a little teaser or whatever for the reflection question this week, I'm going to ask you guys if you would ever consider being in a non-monogamous relationship. Alright, so non-consensual extramarital relationships. So the key here obviously is without consent. So while there are plenty of people in relationships, polyamorous relationships and whatnot, probably even more people are engaging in like deceitful behavior with their partner and going around their backs and whatnot to have sex with people outside of their relationship. So as far as psychological health goes, clearly this is the one to be concerned with, as opposed to being concerned about general polyamory and whatnot. I think this is a really interesting point. A lot of times I present to you guys a certain demographic or something like that, and we say, or let's say like oral sex within adolescence, X% of adolescents have oral sex, sort of thing. And so we're talking about a new phenomenon here, extramarital affairs. So it's like, well, the first question we ask ourselves is, what is it? How do we define it as psychologists? And then 2, what is the prevalence of these affairs? How often do people cheat and whatnot? And I think it's a really important caveat to present that, this is really difficult to determine a really good prevalence rate on this, just because people are actively trying to keep it a secret from who they're in a relationship with, so it's safest to them to not mention it at all. Even if it's an anonymous survey, it's like, for them, the risk is too high, so they may just not even answer these sort of things. But, some people do. So in 2011, 20% of men and 20% of women, so both the same, which is interesting, said they cheated during their current relationship. That is high. That is a lot of people. I'd be really interested to see if that is a replicable study, meaning that like you can just look at any U.S. relationship and you could, look at 10 relationships randomly, and then 2 of them they've had cheated on them. I don't know if that's, I would guess that that's lower, but it really may be the case. So of course, what's the precursor to cheating? It may be things like having sexual fantasies about the person you want to have sex with that's not your partner. 70% of men and women saying they've fantasized about having sex with someone else. So of course people can fantasize about having sex with someone else but never cheat. But then, a lot of people who end up cheating on their partner fantasize about maybe a particular person or something like that. So of course you have to ask, why do people have affairs other than the very obvious, they want to be stimulated and excited and all that sort of stuff, and they don't want to put in the work to their relationship that they already have, or have kind of already checked out of their relationship and don't think that there's much there to salvage and whatnot. But some theories, some other theories as to why people have affairs: unavailability within the marriage, so they don't have a good sex life could be one reason that people have affairs. Dissatisfaction in their relationship, obviously, whatnot. And it just seems like more like a band-aid than an actual fix, that a lot of people go out and have these affairs and feel good, at least while they're with these people, but then that doesn't solve the underlying problem. So if you're cheating on your partner, you gotta ask yourself very seriously, like, do I need to break up with my partner, or do we need to have a major overhaul of our relationship? Do we need to go to couples therapy and all this sort of stuff, instead of just chasing after that excitement and pleasure and whatnot with a new partner and everything? Alright, so let's look at divorce now. So almost half of all first marriages end in divorce in the U.S. So in the 1950s, about 25% of first marriages ended in divorce, which I'm kind of surprised really that it was even that high. But about 50% of first marriages end in divorce in the U.S. And then remarriage rates of divorced people have decreased over the past, maybe, let's say, 30 years or so, saying that people get divorced and then, having a second marriage. A lot more people are opting out of getting married again. They have that first marriage and then they're like, I'm fine with having a relationship, but I don't really know if I want to get married again. So that could be something like just not feeling like very confident about having a lifelong relationship, and or something like that maybe. Marrying young, highest risk. So this is like getting married at 18, 19 sort of years old. That group has the highest chance of getting divorced, as opposed to 30-year-old, 40-year-olds, 70-year-olds getting married. So I think some psychologists are theorizing that, a lot of people are trying to wrap their minds around relationship dissatisfaction in general, and but also, our higher divorce rates and everything. And some people are thinking that just increased expectations of what marriage will do for you and whatnot leads to divorce. So kind of just like having higher standards and whatnot for our relationships, really acknowledging that not just being in any old relationship is better than being single. Being single can be awesome, so don't ruin it with just getting with someone just because they're willing to marry you, sort of thing. Women's economic independence. So this is pretty obvious, like so many more women now being able to work and make a livable wage and all this sort of stuff, so they have more options. Whereas in the past, women were like almost literally forced into marriage to be able to, I'm thinking, before 1900s or something like that, kind of forced into marriage just to have a house and have food and all that stuff and whatnot. So, and then they would hesitate to get divorced, obviously, because they would lose all that. So now that women have gained, at least in the US and whatnot, recently have gained a lot more independence of, control over reproduction, whether they want to do that or not, and then control over their own income. Now they can be, a lot more selective about who to marry or if to marry at all. So some other reasons that people give for divorce: infidelity, but I think it's pretty important to ask yourself, like, what caused the infidelity? So it's like, was your relationship already poor to begin with, and therefore you committed infidelity and then you get divorced? Or is the actual reason for the divorce just a poor relationship in general? But infidelity may be like the straw that broke the camel's back. So once someone cheats on another, they're like, okay, now I know for sure I need to get divorced. Communication problems, I'm not exactly sure like what that would be. I think that would be more so underlying sort of thing, like I was saying, something more substantial. So like actually not feeling close to one's partner, not feeling that emotional attachment, and things like that could be labeled as communication problems. I seriously doubt that it's like, I don't know, but yeah. General incompatibility, they get married, maybe they're really sexually attracted to each other at the beginning and didn't have a deep relationship, get married, and then they're like, oh man, we're actually not very compatible, and then get divorced. So that's seems avoidable if you put a lot more time and effort into the front end of things. Personality clashes, growing apart. I think this is probably more so for younger people. So, like at like age 18 or something like that, two people get together, and then by the time that they're 30, they may be very different people. So, like changing religions or something like that. And a lot of people say drug abuse. This can be definitely a deal breaker. Someone who doesn't seek help and continually just is addicted to one or more substances and whatnot, and neglects so many aspects of their whole life, and their spouse may be very frustrated with them and just sees no hope, because the person who's addicted to alcohol or what have you is not able to get it together. And of course, abuse. I mean, this is the simplest one, because a lot of times if someone is abusive once or twice, it's very likely that they are abusive in the future. So it's like, well, the only sure way to protect myself is just to divorce this person and cut my losses, sort of thing. Alright, last topic, and we'll end here for today. Let's talk about interracial marriage. I think that, most of us nowadays almost don't even really bat an eye if we see a couple with different races together, and maybe even celebrate that. We're like, historically that's been literally illegal for people to do. And, 70 years ago or 100 years ago, society was vehemently against it. Well, white people, mostly in power. And, so we may even see an interracial couple and celebrate that sort of thing. So in the Supreme Court decision, Loving versus Virginia, it was decided that interracial couples can actually get married. So before that Supreme Court decision, it being literally illegal for interracial couples to be together. So this just harkens back to me other issues that were kind of passed during this time, like not same-sex marriage. That was just recently, relatively, but more like let's say just same-sex sexual relationships being legal and things like that. Now let's look at this term. I've heard that it's kind of a derogatory term, but I think it's also what was a legal term as well back in the day. Miscegenation. I had not heard it before until looking into this a little bit more. Sex between people, different races, so it was illegal until 1967. So it's just yet another step that we've made, I think, in the right direction as a country, obviously, to legalize things like that. But it's still mind-boggling to think that in my parents' generation, that sex between different races and therefore marriage and things were illegal when they were growing up, my parents. And that's pretty hard for me to wrap my mind around. Literally the government enforcing those sort of rules and whatnot feels very Big Brother in a very bad way sort of thing. Interracial marriage increasing dramatically since law elimination, so that just tells me that all sorts of interracial couples obviously were attracted to each other and wanted to commit their lives to each other, and there was just this big push for probably so long that people were interracial people were not interracial people, but a couple that were different races wanted to be together, but weren't really able to do this until law was passed. So in 1980, which was relatively, so let's look at 1967, so 1966, it was illegal for people of different races to get married. Then just about a little over 10 years later, already 7% of marriages in 1980 were interracial. That's so many. That's I don't know, at least maybe 1 million or something like that. But it seemed like there was this dam that was building up all these couples who wanted to get married and whatnot. And so it was just this big boom once it was legal that people were like, yes, I can commit my life to this person I love. And then in 2010, still increasing to 15%. So who knows about 2020 if that's even more, but that's a lot, 15% of marriages being interracial. So if you ever see any research in the future about marriage that doesn't address the topic at all about interracial marriage, that's kind of a flag for you to think about and maybe criticize their research. And so just looking at public approval ratings, 1958, when it was illegal, still about 4% of the population saying that they approved of that, which is not that much. But then in 2013, 87% of people saying that they did approve of that. So that's a major shift. So basically 50 years difference, there's just totally different change in public approval of interracial marriage. It just goes to show you that society can change, at least in some ways, even if it was in a poor place to begin with. Just some psychological research that's been done on interracial couples, interracial versus same-race couples, similar in attachment styles, so just the way that they feel comforted by their partners during times of stress and whatnot. Same-sex, same-race couples and different race interracial couples, both going to their partner during times of stress because they feel so safe with them. Similar in both relationships, as you imagine. But this is pretty interesting. I'd have to see, what other people have found, but Troy and colleagues in 2006 found that interracial couples report significantly higher relationship satisfaction. So I could see this being the case, and maybe, because they've kind of had to fight for their relationship a little bit more than same-race couples. Maybe they, do derive more satisfaction from their relationship. But that is, let me check our time. Yeah. That is where we'll stop today. So next week we'll start with the sexual dysfunctions. Let me look at the syllabus real quick. So we'll do week 14. We're gonna have Thanksgiving break a couple days, so it'll be kind of like our week that we had Veterans Day. So I'll have a little bit shorter of a lecture on next week because of Thanksgiving break. But we'll definitely cover Chapter 14, Sexual Difficulties and Solutions, and may get to start getting to Chapter 16, Atypical Sexual Behaviors. But if you're reading ahead, of course you can read these chapters or not, but I haven't completely decided on other than chapter 14 that we'll cover that next week. But that's what I'm mostly decided about. We may or may not pick up chapter 16, Atypical Sexual Behaviors, but we probably will. So remember to email me any questions you have about the content of the lectures and whatnot, and I would love just to hear how your experience is going in the class and whatnot. So just let me know how that's going as